Welcome. My name is Kevin, and I run the Bible Artist, my website. I believe that the Bible can provide the arts of complex characters and stories with profound insight into the human condition. And I believe the arts can provide us with insight into the meaning of Scripture and the beauty of the gospel. And we are going to be discussing a new Bible show. So, most of my work on the Bible Artist has been primarily focused on The Chosen, which has been really the biggest Bible show in the past few years, really the biggest Bible property in a long, long time. And that's been really fun. And I still love The Chosen. I'm still going to be covering The Chosen. I'm excited for season 5. But we have a new Bible show that's on the horizon, just coming up in less than a month. So this is David and the Outlaws, which will be on Amazon Prime Video. But it's been produced by the Wonder Project, which is a Christian organization. So if you know John Irwin or John Gunn, they were guys who were involved with, like, I Can Only Imagine, the Jesus Revolution, Case for Christ. So these are like solid, Christian men. They're not, kind of out there just trying to make a quick buck on biblical stories, but these are people who actually care about Scripture, and they are taking the biblical story of David from the book of Samuel, and they are trying to bring it to the screen. And so we're going to look at a trailer that they just released. Just came out earlier today, and I'm really excited for it. But before I get in too far, real quick, I'd like to introduce my co-host Victor. Victor, anything you want to share?
I'm Victor. I'm a video producer and writer in Lake Charles, Louisiana. I'm currently writing a Christian fantasy novel called The Sojourners. It's kind of a cross between Game of Thrones and Narnia. It's like, what if, or what would it take for a entire fantasy world to convert to Christianity? So I'm currently streaming or making available. The chapters are available for free on my website, bigdigital.substack.com, link down below.
Awesome. Well, thanks again, Victor, for joining, because this is kind of short notice, but I saw the trailer and I really wanted to jump in and discuss it. I've already done some kind of shot-by-shot analysis on my blog, The Bible Artist, BibleArtist.com, but I thought it would be more fun to kind of discuss it with Victor and give more kind of just impressions and other things like that. So maybe just big picture, Victor, you saw the trailer. Yeah, any kind of big picture impressions or thoughts about it?
I just thought they're taking it seriously. It looks epic. It looks like all the money's on the screen, and
Yeah.
it knows who the audience, not who the audience is, but it knows what the audience is looking for when it's
Yes.
coming into a show like this, and it's going to give them all of that in a lot of spectacle. So that's kind of exciting.
Yeah, no, I thought that that's a great way to put it. It knows what the audience wants. So on the one hand, we want spectacle, we want the action, but we also, if it's aimed at kind of a Christian or Jewish audience, we want this to be biblically faithful. In general, this is not like Exodus Gods and Kings or the Noah movie where they're really, really going far off the reservation with the story. There are some kind of extra biblical, interesting moments in the trailer, which we'll kind of get to in a bit. But in general, this looks like the story of David. The themes are definitely from the story of David. This is not like just, the little guy stand strong and you can defeat the giants. This is about little people can trust in a big God, and the big God is the one who takes on the giants. So I was really impressed by that. And I definitely think that they are taking that seriously, which I hope will translate to Christians and churches really promoting the show, because I think it will be a really good, really good biblical adaptation, or at least I'm hoping for that.
Mm-hmm.
So the trailer, it opens up, or sorry, did you have any other kind of big picture impressions or?
No, just one other thing I was going to say about the people making this. I know Dallas Jenkins is like a consultant on this show.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know if he's that involved, but I think if they're at least having him, kind of give his feedback, he knows what these kind of shows need to kind of do and how to navigate some of these things. So if he can at least kind of help them smooth out the edges, I think his involvement is going to be a real positive for the whole thing.
Definitely. Okay, yeah. So let's get into I'm just going to go shot by shot. So I don't have the video. Instead, I just took screenshots. It's just easier to kind of navigate through. and we'll just go through, try to get through the entire trailer. We may not say everything about every single shot, but we'll just kind of give some impressions, kind of observe about kind of the big picture story of the trailer, stuff like that. And so here we start out. David is by a stream. He's clearly picking the stones that he is going to use to take on Goliath. We even get that a little bit in the narration. I think the narrator, it's a female narrator, and she says something about, can a single stone change the course of history? And so obviously she's talking about the stone that David uses to strike Goliath. And so it's kind of setting up that this is going to be a world-changing epic story. It's going to be something that really matters. This is not kind of a small story. This is a big story. So we see David, he picks out this pretty special looking stone. It's white where all the other ones are dark. We get our first view of Michael Iskander, who is our David. He's a teenager or like maybe a young adult. So this is not kind of your, Sunday school children's Bible storybook where David is just a little boy. And this is most likely the most realistic thing. Like the word in scripture that mentions David being a boy, it doesn't necessarily mean like someone who's like prepubescent. It just means that it's someone who is younger, someone who probably isn't married, that kind of thing. So a teenager like this kind of looks perfect as far as I'm concerned. And then we jump and we start and we set up the opposition. And so our first introduction to Goliath, we can't even see his entire body in the frame. And I think that's very intentional, that they're like setting him up as like so huge that he doesn't even fit within the picture. All the other soldiers are looking up to him. Yeah, I'm curious, Victor, did you have any thoughts on Goliath?
I thought it was like I had to laugh out loud the first time I saw him in a good way. I was like, they're going for it. It's not just a Goliath that's kind of tall. This is a real giant. And that's I kind of think that this really ties into kind of what we were saying earlier, is that, if the general audience knows anything, it's David and Goliath. I mean, they may even think that that's his last name. So, I think it was, very brilliant and wise to show this like right at the top of the trailer. Is like, we're going to show you Goliath and he's going to be cool.
Yep. Yeah, they're definitely like forecasting right away. Like, okay, remember, this is what the story is about. David and Goliath. Like, you remember that stuff, and then we'll go into kind of more of the backstory and more of the details. But they really want to make sure that we know what the story is about and kind of get hooked in. I had kind of mixed feelings about Goliath. Like, I feel like it's going to kind of feel a little uncanny valley looking at him. And so like I don't know, I'll get it like a better sense as we actually like see the entire show, kind of see his character. But yeah, I had mixed feelings. I do think, I guess on the positive end, I like that the show is going for kind of a mythic feel. So they aren't trying to like downplay things or try to make them as realistic or like, grounded as possible, but they're letting the supernatural stuff feel supernatural. They're putting in, so they're, within scripture, some people don't know this. So when the Old Testament, are copies of it, there's like a Hebrew version that we have, and then there's a Greek version. And the Hebrew and the Greek versions actually have different heights for Goliath. And so when most people are depicting Goliath, they go with the Hebrew version, which has him as like 9 feet, 9 inches or something, like something definitely like beyond naturally tall. Whereas the Greek version has him at like 6'9" or something, which back in the time was still like very, very extraordinarily tall. And so they could have gone with kind of the 6'9" version of Goliath, but they are very clearly going with the 9 foot, or, just massive, because this isn't even like, some like, who's the super tall, like the Elephant Man, or like, this is beyond like anything we would encounter in normal life. And they're really just letting us know that and playing up like this guy is massive, and, using him to create this this terrifying kind of impression. We get a shot of the Philistine kings and commanders. This guy, I think, is King Achish, who Victor and we actually plotted out a show also following part of David's life. Our show was just focused on the period of time when David is the commander of a band of outlaws in the wilderness on the run from Saul. And Achish, here, he comes into our show a little bit. He would have come in even more in season 2. We may yet get around to writing season 2, but we wrote season 1, and he shows up a couple times. So he's kind of going to have an interesting relationship with David, where he's a commander of the Philistines. So right, like early on in the show, he's definitely going to be an enemy. But if the show follows kind of the biblical storyline of David's life, eventually David is going to have to flee and join up with the Philistines, and he'll actually have to work for Achish for a bit. And you get the sense in the biblical account that there's like kind of a respect that develops between the two of them. So it'll be interesting to kind of see their relationship develop. We also will eventually get to discussing kind of the borders of the show. Like, is season 1, is it going to run from, like, obviously, it's starting a little bit before David and Goliath and their battle. Is it going to get to the death of Saul and David's ascent to the throne, or is it going to end before then? We'll get to discussing that in a bit.
One thing, just kind of going back to the king right there, just from a casting perspective, I think it matches what you're saying, because he doesn't look like he's an evil guy. He looks like he's not friendly, but at least somebody that we, the audience, are supposed to have semi-positive feelings for. So I think we will maybe see that kind of that transition
complex for him. Yeah, I agree. We get the armies facing off against each other, and then we see Goliath. We get an even bigger sense of like how he's almost like twice as tall as all these other guys that are around him. He's got all these massive spears that he presumably either uses or has just to kind of show his strength. And he's challenging the Israelites, calling them cowards, asking them to send a champion. And so, as in the biblical story, so how this actually was kind of uncommon in the ancient Israel. It was more common actually up in Greece. And so a lot of biblical scholars think that the Philistines are actually descended from some Greeks who traveled down the coasts and settled in the area of Palestine, became the Philistines. And so they're kind of like Greek background. And in ancient Greece, instead of like having your entire army fight the other army and just, everybody gets killed, you would often just send a champion from each side. And whoever won between the two champions, that army won, and the other army had to kind of accept defeat and submit to the conqueror. And so, as in the biblical story, Goliath is challenging the Israelites to send a champion, and whoever wins, then that army is going to win, and they'll kind of triumph over the other nation. And so at first it looks like, the Israelites are not going to have someone to send. As in, in the biblical story, all the other Israelites are trembling and scared. But then the ranks of Israel part, and out comes David, Michael Iskander, and he calls out Goliath. We don't get David's full response to Goliath that he gives in the Bible. I'm sure that we'll have it in the actual show. This is just shots that we're getting, but David's speech in the Bible is really a killer speech. So I'm looking forward to that moment where he's telling Goliath that he's gonna strike him down and feed his body to the birds of the air, because the battle belongs to the Lord's, not to sword or spear. And then he charges off to encounter Goliath. And so that part of the trailer, they're just kind of wanting to front load kind of the main event, the battle between David and Goliath, make sure that we know what the story is ultimately about, draw in viewers, make it seem epic. yeah, any thoughts from that section of the trailer before
I
we
mean, just
move on?
this is the most impressive looking version of this story being told on film that I've ever seen so far.
Yep.
So they've got my interest. I went from not really a skeptic, but I was, had my arms crossed, like, okay, let's see what this show's got. And then as soon as
Yep.
they showed that, I'm like, all right, I think we're gonna be all right.
Yeah, yeah. These hosts, they look large. They look, the production value on like the costumes and everything. It looks impressive, and so I am where you're at. I'm pretty excited to see some of these battles happening and that kind of thing. If you're from kind of the fandom of like Lord of the Rings, you love like the Battle of Helm's Deep and some of these other epic stories, then I think this is going to be a show for you. I'm surprised that they really haven't done more promotion up until this point. So I really hope that they kind of crank their promotion up, because I haven't seen like a lot of discussion of the show. So
I'd be
anyway,
curious if they have like a Super Bowl spot. Would be a good.
oh, that would be a good idea. Yeah.
Good time to do. I mean, I don't know if they would. If Amazon would do a biblical show as their Super Bowl spot, but maybe.
Yeah. Okay, so at this point, after kind of they've set up that clash between David and Goliath, then we take a big step back, and our narrator says, let me tell you the story of a simple shepherd boy. We see David playing his harp out in the fields, and then we get a little, oh yes, now I need to switch to, sorry. Then we get David as a child, and we see his mother playing the harp. And so, that gives us kind of the backstory of, the reason that David learned to use the harp is because his mother presumably was playing, psalms and different songs to him. And he has a very loving look as he's looking up to her. I guess it could be his grandmother. It's kind of hard to tell the age of the actress from this picture, but mother, grandmother. He's kind of been raised into this tradition of singing, songs of praise. And we see him as a younger boy, presumably tending the sheep. And then we get this line where David alludes to how he wants to go and fight, but only his brothers are allowed to go. And he's asking, like, why can't I go and fight? And as he's saying that, we see this man here, who I believe, based on another image, I believe is David's brother Eliab, who we are told in the Bible, all of David's other brothers went to fight. Eliab, I think, is specifically mentioned. So when David gets sent to the front line where Goliath is, David's not there to fight originally. David is just there to deliver some food to his brothers. Eliab here, he's fighting some kind of hooded assailants. This move here that he does, I think it's really interesting. So later on in the book of Samuel, we're told how one of David's other men, Joab, uses this move where he would hit people, like reverse hit them with his spear, and he uses that to assassinate one of David's other commanders, Abishai. No, Abishai is his brother. I'm blanking right now, but David he gets fed up with Joab, and he appoints another commander, and Joab gets mad at that, and he ends up killing that commander, assassinating him. And this is the move that Joab uses to do that. So I'm curious, one, it could just be a total coincidence. Two, it could be like this is like a kind of a family move or something, and Eliab will teach this to Joab, and Joab will eventually use it. Joab is David's cousin, so they're all kind of part of the same family. It's hard to tell in the Bible kind of the exact ages of all of them. Or I could also see them kind of taking some of Joab's role as kind of David's right-hand henchman, kind of the one who does like the dirty work. And I could see them giving that to Eliab just to kind of condense characters down and try to like give that very important role to someone who's even closer to David biologically, because, you know, so you're not having to get into like, oh, this is David's cousin, but he's also the commander. I don't know. Or, you know, like I said, I could be making too much of this, and it's just a cool move that they have him do. But it's still,
I'd
it's
say
a
half and
cool fight
half.
sequence.
Because I know later we see David do kind of a Matrix or a superhero kind of move, jumping out of a window. So it's kind of, I think that's where the show's going to lean into.
Yeah.
You know, once we get into some battles, we're going to see all kind of cool stuff happen. They're going to do cool movie type moves a lot. So I think, you know, I think that may tie into the actual thing that the Bible's talking about, but I think they're also leading into just, does it look cool?
That's a good point. Sorry, I'm just trying one thing quick. Sorry.
Yeah, in the trailer, it did say his brothers were fighting. So that may also indicate that we're going to see more than one of them. I'm sure we're going to see them, but like I said, I agree that we're probably going to have one that's going to be the condensed down focal point character that we spend more time with.
Yeah. Yep. Okay, never mind. And yeah, this is the same brother, and he says to David at one point something like, "You're not a man of God." So I don't know if he's like frustrated with David. Maybe, you know, David does something that angers him, and he's like putting him down, or maybe David is kind of being uppity. Maybe this is like when David goes and starts to ask people about Goliath, kind of near the front lines. And maybe Eliab's like, "You're not a man of God. Like, don't try to like think that you can take on this giant." Or, you know, maybe he's like trying to get David to kind of, I don't know, not be like so righteous, and to just like, I don't know. I'm kind of interested where they're going with that relationship between the two brothers. We see David get brought in. This is presumably Saul's palace. I think this is probably Saul holding court. And then we jump away, and our narrator, she mentions how this is the story of an outcast who eventually becomes king. And so we've seen kind of how he's an outcast, like his brothers put him down. He's just this kind of nobody shepherd boy. But then we see the prophet Samuel here. Samuel anoints David. We hear him give a speech, which is very reminiscent of what the Bible says about, you know, how man looks at the outer appearance, but the Lord looks at the heart. And Samuel says, like, "I see your heart, and you have the heart of a lion." And that is setting up this moment, which David is in this cave. It's dark, and he's got blood all over him. And so I'm thinking that this is probably David after he has killed a lion, which in the Bible he mentions, like, "I've killed a lion, I can kill this Philistine." And so they definitely couldn't pass up that story. So we're going to, I think, see him have that battle, which will be pretty epic. So my guess is that episode 1, we won't get David versus Goliath. I think episode 1, we're going to probably get this story, and maybe like some setup of like the Philistines kind of on the move. Yeah, that would be my guess for the first episode's kind of story arc, kind of establishing David's bravery, his courage, and setting up some of the problems that he's going to get to. And then maybe episode 2 will get David and Goliath, or maybe not even until episode 3. Here we've got David getting brought into Saul's court. And then we've kind of set up David and like him as kind of this hero. And now we shift to the problem bit. So we see the Philistine armies. They're showing up. They've got fire arrows. they start raining down fire as a mother and her child are fleeing. And I think this is probably a messenger who's probably delivering news of what happened to Saul and his court as they're looking at maps. Were you going to say something, Victor?
No.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
I think this is probably also David in the cave. But then Prince Jonathan here, he shows up. I'm guessing that, so here's kind of the sequence I'm imagining is we'll get some sort of, scene where the Philistines are attacking the city. We'll get the messenger coming to Saul's court, and then Saul is going to dispatch Jonathan and whoever these guys are to go check things out. They're going to arrive, find ruins, and then Jonathan is going to find this giant handprint, which like makes his hand look like a little baby hand. And we hear him describe how the hand was like the size of a weaver's basket. And so this is kind of setting up like, okay, Israel is under assault. The Philistines are encroaching on them. They're assembling. They're attacking Israelite towns. And among the Philistines is this giant who is just causing all kinds of havoc. And so after kind of reminding us of that big threat, then we go back to David and we see kind of his big faith. So we get the famous scene of David approaching Saul, and Saul, in the biblical account, Saul is initially kind of like, are you sure you want to do this, kid? Which I bet we'll get, but we're just kind of focusing on the more heroic bits. And so Saul is like, face the giant with the same spirit that you had when you came into this room or something. And then, oh yeah, do you want to?
I was gonna say I do love. Let's kind of go back to that image that you just had with the landscape. You never see Israel that lush.
Mm-hmm.
I never think of it as a place that's that lush.
Yeah, I was surprised by that too. Which, part of that may be, we're thinking about modern day and, environments have changed over time. Mm-hmm. Part of it may also be like, geographically, like certain areas are more lush than others. Really, this scene kind of gives almost like Garden of Eden vibes, right. Which maybe they're kind of wanting us to kind of have in the back of our head. I don't think it's En-Gedi, but it kind of makes me think of En-Gedi. So later on in David's career, while he's kind of leading an outlaw band, one of the places that they go is a fortress that is in this kind of oasis, Edenic kind of garden called En-Gedi. And so this makes me think of it. Maybe this is kind of that location, and we'll circle back to there later on in the show. But yeah, it is a very beautiful image. And so presumably, at least the trailer gives us the impression that this is like the kind of the head of the stream, which runs down to where David is getting his rocks. Prince Jonathan comes up to David. He's kind of questioning how David can be the champion for Israel when just a moment ago he was playing music for Saul. So they're gonna have to set up that dynamic too. We see, I think they cut quick to, oh, I have to go to another set of slides. Yeah, they cut quick to David playing his harp. And so, yeah, they're going to have to do a storyline also before David and Goliath, where David is playing his harp for Saul. So that could be potentially episode 2, because that's going to have to be a story too, like establishing, Saul having his fits with the evil spirit tormenting him and David playing his harp. But anyway, in the previous slide, Jonathan is basically saying, like, how can you be the champion when you're just, like the musician guy or whatever? And then we get to one of the most interesting moments, as far as I'm concerned, because this is not something that's there in the biblical account, but I think it's a very interesting kind of creative mashup of another biblical story. At least that's what I think is going on here. So my theory on this random soldier who's standing in the middle of the stream, which seems like a weird place to be, and he doesn't really look like some of the other soldiers that we see. My theory is that he is the commander of the Lord's hosts, or the angel of the Lord, who he famously appears to Joshua in Joshua chapter 5, I think, just before Israel attacks Jericho. It's this famous story where Joshua doesn't really know who this guy is. He sees him and he's got a sword, and Joshua's like, who are you for? The armies of Israel or the other side? And the guy's like, no, I'm part of the Lord's hosts, and he has this kind of encounter with Joshua where he tells Joshua to take off his shoes. It's also a bit reminiscent of, Moses, the burning bush. So I think that the show is kind of trying to make a connection to that, especially because he then takes out the sword, which looks kind of potentially magical a little bit, or supernatural. We can't really see the guy's face. And so I could see this moment being a moment as like David is kind of struggling with doubt. He doesn't know how he's going to take on this giant, where he has this brief encounter with the angel of the Lord, who basically is encouraging him to, trust in his God, who's bigger than this mighty giant. I don't know. What do you think about that theory?
I mean, I think you're spot on that. This gives me a lot of Excalibur vibes, where the lady in the lake and King Arthur getting his sword, or getting his sword back, I guess in this case. But it's kind of water leading to swords. It's a common visual fantasy-ish kind of motif.
Yeah, that's a good point. I didn't even think about the kind of the fantasy dimension of it.
It just looks cool.
Yeah, it's definitely a cool image. And even though it's not like there in the biblical story, what I like about it is that it sets up kind of an echo or a parallel between those two stories, Joshua's story and David's story. And there are like connections there. So in Joshua's story, they're going off to fight Jericho. Jericho is it's set up as this giant fortress, with giant walls. The words that are used to describe it are similar to the words that are used to describe giants elsewhere. And the people in the land of Canaan at that time are described as giants, as the descendants of the Nephilim, which is probably also what Goliath is. And so there's a lot of connections there. And then the way that God has Israel defeat the Canaanites in Jericho is by doing something very unusual, by marching around 7 days, and then the walls of Jericho came tumbling down. And the tumbling down even is a little bit of a parallel of Goliath falling down, but kind of trusting in this strange, kind of seemingly weak way, but looking to a greater God to overcome this seemingly kind of insurmountable giant enemy. There's a lot of kind of there that they're kind of inviting us to see by creating this scene that kind of mashes up that moment from a previous story. So even though this isn't in the original story, I think it's a really interesting addition that they're doing here.
Well, I think there's a couple images coming up that I think and they look like they're kind of part of the same sequence, that I think it could be a whole mashup of a whole bunch of different. God has been working, like it looks like it might be a parting of the Red Sea kind of thing coming up, where we just see a flash of that. And, when he touches the rock, it's kind of like a burning bush kind of moment. So it seems like it just could be, a lot of little flashes of things that have happened that we're going to recognize as a average biblical person that has seen these things over our lifetimes.
Yeah, no, I'm exactly with you on that. So yeah, David having his hand kind of set on fire here. I think that the fire imagery, you could connect it to a lot of different things in the Bible. Holy Spirit, being connected to fire, and when the Holy Spirit would rush upon a warrior kind of in this period, it would empower him to take on his enemies. So that could be kind of the presence of the Spirit with David. The fire also makes me think of like the the burning bush, or
Mhm.
the pillar of fire and cloud, God's kind of empowering presence with his people, which enables them to uh, take on or kind of be delivered from their foes. And then that idea is really, really amped up by seeing this wall of water, which, like you said, it makes you think of the Red Sea parting, also the Jordan parting, which are kind of these moments of God. So, the Red Sea parting is when Israel is running from the Egyptians. The Egyptians are a far superior military force with kind of the best technology, and they're about to kill all the Israelites, and the Israelites go through the waters, and then the Egyptians try to follow them. The waters come crashing down on the Egyptians, and this giant, insurmountable force has been defeated by the miraculous God of Israel. So I think that they're definitely trying to set up that connection, set up the connection to the Holy Spirit as this empowerer of heroes, and God's kind of presence with David. I found those images to be really interesting in the way that they are kind of calling up those biblical echoes, while also kind of creating this more kind of mythic, fantastical imagery. Um, yeah, this movie or this show definitely, it's not going for kind of like the when I in a recent blog, when I was comparing the Mary movie to The Chosen, I kind of came up with these two categories of like sometimes with like biblical adaptations or even like kind of historical adaptations. Sometimes you have ones that go in kind of the more mythic direction where things are like over the top and they really play up kind of the supernatural elements, or the action and the epicness, things that are kind of transcendent and not something that we would normally experience. And so, it's just trying to kind of create this sense of wonder and adventure and things like that. Whereas The Chosen, I feel like it tries to be a little more grounded, a little more relatable. It's giving us characters who are similar to us. They have our foibles. It gives us a lot of kind of domestic kinds of issues and concerns. And The Chosen actually kind of doesn't include some of the more like transcendent moments. We don't get the Mount of Transfiguration. We don't, get the heavens opening and the Spirit descending on Jesus. So it tries to focus on the elements that kind of are familiar to us and as contemporary viewers. Whereas it seems like House of David is going kind of more in that mythic direction. Not like just totally making stuff up like Noah did at certain points, but like taking biblical elements that are more kind of in the register of fantasy, or kind of that kind of film or story show, and like inserting those even into places where they don't show up in the story. We've got these like epic weapons. Goliath has this massive shield that is being unveiled here. So they're really wanting this to feel like a big story, a mythic story. Yeah, I don't know.
So far, nothing they're showing seems like it breaks the Bible in any way.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
even like this sequence right here, like the little vision. It's like it's we've seen scenes like that in the Bible with other figures before, so we know that kind of thing does happen. So it's not unusual, and it's not impossible to believe that David had a similar kind of vision, because clearly he is inspired enough to make this incredible meet this incredible challenge. So it's not impossible to think that there was a moment like this, and even if it doesn't feel like it's violating any sort of scripture to suggest it.
Yep. Yeah. So I mean, I was just going to say that The Chosen, it also introduces elements, whereas The Chosen tends to introduce elements that are more like grounded and like relatable and things like that. It looks like David, it's introducing some of these more fantastical elements, but it's doing that by taking stuff from other places in the Bible and kind of bringing them in and doing things that are plausible kind of within a biblical framework. So, like you said, it doesn't feel like they're breaking the story or doing something that violates kind of the spirit of the text. yeah, or kind
Yeah,
of
like Noah broke the
yeah,
Bible.
yes,
Yeah,
yes,
this is not doing that. This is
mhm,
it's staying within coloring within the lines
yes.
of the Bible.
Uh, yeah, quick shot of this woman in red. I'm guessing maybe Saul's wife, but I don't know. This, I think, is Saul's daughter, Michal, and she's talking to David. David kind of confides in her how he's terrified, but she says, she believes in him. She's confident that he'll face this foe. And so it looks like they are setting up the relationship between David and Michal even before David takes on Goliath. Unless this could potentially be at a later point, but they give us the impression that this is her talking to David before he takes on Goliath. Whereas in kind of the biblical account, you get the impression that they met afterward. But it makes sense that they are doing this. The biblical account, it it doesn't kind of totally like give us all the connecting links. We're told that David was playing music for Saul before he took on Goliath, and so it's possible that
Hmm.
he met Michal back then, and so it makes sense that they would kind of introduce her character a little bit earlier, introduce their relationship a little bit earlier, to add kind of stakes to the conflict between David and Goliath.
Yep.
Here we cut to just a bunch of action sequences. I think this is Jonathan fighting against Philistine warriors. We'll come back to this in a second because I think there's a really interesting moment here. This is, again, Achish, king of Gath. See a charging army. This looks like a different moment, really kind of epic battle, like kind of makes me think of like the battle at the fields of Pelennor and Return of the King. I think there's like lightning in the sky too. Really. Then a castle on fire.
You gotta have a castle on fire.
Yeah, and then here is another like really interesting image. So this looks to me like King Saul holding the body of Prince Jonathan. And if that's the case, we know where that moment happens. It happens just before Saul himself dies, at kind of the end of his reign. I think it's in like 1 Samuel 30 or 31, at the fight at Mount Gilboa with the Philistines, and that happens while David. So a lot of stuff happens between David and Goliath, and this moment. David, he uh, he joins the Israelite army. He's successful. Then Saul gets jealous. David has to run. Saul goes after him. David's in the wilderness. Eventually, David and his band of wilderness warriors join the Philistines. And then the Philistines are going to go to war with Israel. And then the Philistines don't want David around. They send him off so that he's not a part of the battle. Saul has his thing with the Witch of Endor. A lot of different stuff happens. And so part of me is like, I can't imagine how they could potentially get all of that stuff into a single season to set up this moment. I mean, it's possible if they like condense things down and cut stuff out, but it would be like it would be a lot. So just for
I mean,
context,
yeah,
oh
I think you could condense all of that into like 2 episodes. His time in the wilderness as he's running around gathering allies and doing all the stuff. Our series is going to take multiple seasons to show. They'll probably be able to do it in a couple episodes.
Yeah, so I was just going to say that for context for people. So Victor and I, the series that we came up with, David and the Outlaws, we took an entire 10 episode season just for that period of David's time in the wilderness on the run from Saul, because there's a lot of different like little incidents and events that happen during that time. A couple of times where Saul almost catches David. There's some interesting like adventures that they have, and so yeah, they'd have to like cut a lot of that stuff out, which would hurt my heart. But at the same time, if they do that, we've still got David and the Outlaws, and so all the more reason for people to check out the work that we've been doing. So it is totally possible that this is just the straight scene that we're going to get probably at the very end of season 1. I think it's also possible, though, that this is like a vision, either maybe like Saul having a dream sequence. This could be part of his like demonic torment, that they're kind of sending him visions of how he's going to lose his son Jonathan, and maybe this is part of what kind of drives Saul to attack David, because he thinks David is going to be part of what leads to his son's death. I could see something like that going on.
The
Or
fire
maybe
imagery would lead me to think that
yeah,
it's
because
so
it's like
so over the
hazy.
top, right?
Yeah. In which case, this season might not get there by the end of the season. Yeah, so it's possible either way, but it feels like a lot to get all the way there. But yeah,
just in general for the flow of the show, because the show is called House of David.
That's true.
Which to me implies that we're going to go all the way to like Solomon and maybe beyond within this. So it's like I would think that by the end of the season, you want to have David on the throne. That's how you would end this season, with him in triumph, and then then we cut forward a little bit later for the next season, where we get a lot of all the other stuff going on, including Bathsheba, and then at the end of that is we have Solomon born, or maybe even become king by the end, and then he's the main character in season 3. And then I don't know if you could really, I mean, I guess you could do a season 4, but there's not any strong figures in the House of David after Solomon like those 2 characters were.
Yeah, not for a while.
Wrap a whole show around, right?
Yeah, I don't think that I could see the show concluding with maybe Saul or Solomon ascending to the throne. I don't even know if we get Solomon as like a main character. Part of me is even questions whether we'll get that far, because like I feel like they're going to want to stick, if they're kind of establishing Michael Iskander as David. He's a young looking guy. Like I feel like they're going to have a hard time making him into like an elderly David. So either
I think you'd recast him.
Okay, yeah, they do that mode, but I feel like you at least want to stick like 2 seasons with that actor. I mean, I suppose even if they have him on the throne of Judah by the end of the season, then you could do a season of like the kind of civil war between kind of the remnant of Saul's people and Judah under David. Yeah, I do get the logic of trying to get David to the throne so that it is like the House of David. But yeah, I don't know. There's so much there that yeah, part of me will feel sad, but I get it. Like you have to make sacrifices and adaptation to kind of get the big picture story moving. So
if they could make Timothy Chalamet look tough as Paul Atreides in Dune, then I think they can make this actor look a little older and more mature.
That's true. Yeah, that's true. Yeah, I definitely think they could have him through, like Bathsheba, but they would probably want to recast, by a little bit later.
Elderly one.
Hi, Tiger Lily. Blessings to you as well. Thanks for joining us. And by the way, yeah, if anyone is here and you have any comments or questions, thoughts, definitely jump in the comments below. We've got just a little bit left here. So there's another image where it's the Philistine army charging, and here's the Israelites. And I love that they have the Israelites wielding like pitchforks and stuff, because the Bible tells us that early on in Saul's reign, the Israelites did not have any blacksmiths. So the Philistines, as a way of kind of like controlling Israel, they prevented them from having blacksmiths so that they couldn't build like swords and like good weapons. And so some of kind of Saul's first battles against the Philistines, most of the Israelites just have like farming tools and stuff like that. And so I think that's what they're going for in this image, which makes me think this might be like early on in the show, like maybe kind of maybe we'll get like a montage kind of showing Saul's rise to power, and him kind of establish kind of how he arose as a leader of Israel, because we need to see kind of his rise so that his fall can be more tragic.
Well, it sounds like that whoever the woman is doing the voiceover for the beginning of the trailer could be almost kind of like Galadriel's doing the voiceover at the beginning of Lord of the Rings, to where we're kind of setting up the whole story, of which that narration we hear for the trailer is just the David part of it.
Yeah, I could see that them doing kind of a Lord of the Rings style, Galadriel, narration montage. And the woman in the trailer, I wouldn't be surprised if that's like Michal, maybe Saul's daughter, because she would kind of have a little bit of perspective on this, or it could be someone else. I'm actually, while I'm thinking of that, I'm wondering if, to your point of kind of wanting to establish the show as the House of David, I could see them starting with kind of David as an older king. Like maybe actually we get an older King David, and we get like a flashback into some of the stuff, just to, because we know where this all is heading, and they may want to kind of like telegraph that, and use that to kind of draw some interesting parallels between David and Saul and stuff like that. But
the narration on this trailer almost sounds like a grandmother telling a grandchild a story. So that could be Solomon, could be Bathsheba talking to Solomon, telling him about his dad.
Yeah, that would be interesting. Okay, Crown, not too much to comment there. Yeah, and then here's that sequence that you were mentioning before, the kind of Matrix-y action sequence. So there's this assassin guy who's got a bow, which, I don't know, from my perspective, if you're an assassin and you're in the same room as someone, a bow is probably not the best choice, but it looks cool. So I'm not gonna like poo-poo them for not necessarily doing the most realistic thing here. So I would guess most likely this assassin is probably sent by Saul. So I definitely think we'll get some of the, Saul going after David during this season. And this is probably someone that he sent, because like it's not like on a battlefield. This is presumably an Israelite city. And then David has to jump out a window, and he's got his sling and he's shooting it back, which definitely not a realistic thing, but totally cool. Rule of cool prevails. I like it. And then we get a really quick cut to what looks like Jonathan fighting against King Saul, which, the Bible tells us there's this one point where Saul gets so mad at Jonathan for, because he suspects that Jonathan's helping David, that he like tries to throw a spear at him. So I think this is probably kind of a elaborated version of that encounter between Saul and David, or Saul and Jonathan, his own son, where he's kind of in this mad fit. It's one of the few scenes that we get that kind of gives us the villainous side of Saul, which that'll be interesting to see how they kind of gradually bring Saul's, because initially in the trailer, he's got that kind of pump you up motivational speech. We don't get any kind of like sinister vibes from him. Yeah, and then close out the trailer, just remind us once again what this is all about. We get Goliath throwing a spear, David twirling around, whirling his sling, preparing to launch it at Goliath. And that is the trailer for House of David. Any other kind of thoughts, big picture, or things that you wanted to discuss with it?
Well, just I noticed that they're going to drop the first 3 episodes on February 27th. So, and then last 5 episodes weekly after that. So we'll get a good night of TV for that.
Yeah. And actually, it's interesting.
What day of the week?
Yeah, I was thinking in my head, like, will it be done before The Chosen gets out? But I think there will be a little overlap. So yeah, life's going to be crazy for me for March and April as I'm trying to, and then they've also got King of Kings coming out. Originally, I thought that Passion of the Christ 2 was coming out, but it looks like that got delayed a year.
Oh, it
But
did? I didn't see that.
yeah. Anyway, so yeah, I left this trailer really encouraged. I'm yeah, I'm would it be bullish on the show? I'm positive about the show. I'm looking forward to it now. So I yeah, my only kind of like uh concern is that like people aren't going to hear about it and it's not going to get like the kind of the views that it should, and that it'll need to kind of sustain long-term production and stuff. But it looks really exciting, and so hopefully word will spread from this trailer. And yeah, I'm looking forward to doing reviews, doing other stuff with it. Lots of exciting stuff in the world of Bible adaptation right now. So if you are into Bible shows, Bible movies, stuff like that, definitely, if you haven't before, check out thebibleartist.com. So I do in-depth review and analysis of each episode of The Chosen. I'll probably do that with House of David as well. With The Chosen, I've been doing like Bible studies for each episode and kind of character studies for all the main characters. And we'll see, like, I'll kind of wait to see, that House of David kind of warrants that level of coverage. But if the trailer is any indication, I'll probably eventually get around to doing that stuff for this show as well. Thanks again, Tiger Lily, for joining us. And yeah, thanks to all of you who have joined us. And if you are wanting to support our discussions and the other stuff that I'm doing, definitely subscribe to the channel, like the video, do all that stuff so that other people can find this conversation. And you can also support my work as the Bible artist through my Buy Me a Coffee account. Thanks for joining us, and I'll look forward to talking about episodes 1 to 3 in a few weeks. Thanks, Victor. Godspeed, everybody.
Take care.